Other Voices SCV with Carole Lutness presents Bridging the Gap. Hi, this is Carole Lutness. I am hosting a Zoom presentation for Santa Claritians called Bridging the Gap. We are a varied group of people within Santa Clarita, very civic-minded people who represent a variety of viewpoints, backgrounds, and we are working on how do we discuss issues and find common ground in a very divisive time. And we primarily focus on local issues, issues that affect our local environment. So tonight, if you would really quick, introduce yourselves. Val?
Muted.
Unmute, Val.
Hello, everyone. My name is Valerie Bradford. I am a 16-year resident of Santa Clarita, my husband and I. I am a mother of 6 and a grandmother of 14. And I am a member of the organizing committee of the NAACP, or Santa Clarita Valley NAACP, and I am excited to be here tonight.
Dave, could you unmute? Could you put Duncan into? He's waiting, Dave. Did you hear me, honey? Sorry, guys. There's Duncan. Hi, Duncan. Okay, go ahead, Al.
Hi there. I'm Alan Ferdman, and I'm the chair of the Ken Country Advisory Committee. I've been living here in Santa Clarita since 1965, and I've seen a lot of changes.
Yes. Okay. And down on the left, my left is Peg.
Hi, Peggy Stabile. I have been a resident with my husband and family since 1978. So Alan, you've beaten me by a number of years. I became very active in PFLAG, which is a support group for the LGBTQ community and family members. My son came out to me in 1986.
Okay, Lynn.
My name's Lynn Planbeck, and I'm the president of Santa Clarita Organization for Planning and the Environment, or SCOPE for short. And I'm also a board member of the Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency, and I've lived in the valley for 44 years.
Okay. And Dave, you want to introduce yourself? We want to unmute. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm Dave, and I'm standing here next to this palm tree. And I am the curmudgeon of the group.
Well, you are the former secretary of SCOPE for many years. And
yes, and I've been the vice president of Democratic Club, and I have, what else have I done?
Run for office.
You ran for water board twice.
Yes.
So yeah, you've been busy. And Duncan, welcome, Duncan. I explained to the group that you are the new president of the Santa Clarita Atheists and Free Thinkers group. And so I want to welcome you tonight. Just give us just a teeny tiny little background about you.
Thank you. I've been in Santa Clarita since 2003, and I own a graphic and web design company called Cadian Design.
Okay.
Anything else?
All right. And tonight we're going to divide this segment into 2 sessions. We're going to do kind of like last time. Peg did a lovely job in a kind of getting to know you segment, talking about how she developed the fire in her belly to become an actress. And really lovely. It's up online, volume 3 of Bridging the Gap on YouTube. And I thought tonight that was so successful and meaningful. I thought tonight we could ask someone else to do that. And then the second segment will be on water issues, which is of course, our perpetual concern. And especially now we're going into another drought and we're worried about water availability. So first of all, we're going to welcome Al to do sort of a background about you, how you developed your social activism and what you've done and what you feel you've accomplished and how you work with people who are not of the same political ilk, things like that, Al. Anything you want to talk about.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Carol. I appreciate it. Yeah, I don't know if my story is that interesting, but here it comes. All right. I was a little Jewish boy born in Brooklyn in 1942. My dad went off to war about 6-7 months after I was born, and served in Europe. He came home in 1947 and passed away in 1948.
Mm.
So my younger brother, who was born just about the time that my dad passed away, was rather sickly. So we moved to Florida for a year. And it was really interesting because when we were in the area that we were in New York, Brighton Beach, it was kind of the same. But when I went to Florida, all of a sudden I had an awakening of just how different areas were. And I remember being very confused and talking to my mother about why, when we walk down the street, we see these people that are on the sidewalk and they get off the sidewalk in the street for us to get by. And we didn't understand. I at least did not understand what was going on. So we lived there for about a year. My stepfather came down and proposed to my mother, and they moved back to New York for a year. And then to get to a warmer climate, his whole family lived here in California. And we moved to California. And here's another example of how we're all, we all have a few stories about how we've been discriminated against. My parents had a hard time renting an apartment at the time when we got here because they wouldn't rent to Jews. And I also noted after we did rent a place and we were here for a while, and I would be talking to my relatives in New York, my cousins, and I found that our music selection was very different. That they didn't play Black musicians back there, and I would listen to XCRB from Mexico with Wolfman Jack broadcasting his show.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what went on. I was a horrible high school student. I left high school a little early, went to a 2-year technical school, went to work at Litton Guidance in 1961. I was married in 1963. And my wife Pamela is Catholic, so that was at that time was a real interesting
marriage.
proposition, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, we moved to Santa Clarita in 1965, and I remember being greeted by a young gentleman who showed me his KKK card and told me I was going to have a terrible time here in Santa Clarita. But I wasn't buying it. He said, "Well, maybe you'll get along because you know all these bikers out here." But I just refused to be a victim. Said, "No, go away," right? And never spoke to him again. And in my time at work, I ended up being in the right place at the right time and getting into software development. And I became a manager. And in hiring people at the time, it wasn't exactly the most prestigious job in the company. And so I had an expanding group of people, and I just hired people that could do the work, right? I mean, that's what you do. I didn't have any other concerns. And when affirmative action came around, I got called in the EEO office and we were talking about it. And I asked a question. I said, why is it that you keep stamping minority candidate on all of my all of my postings? And they said, well, you know what? We've been looking around. You have the most diverse work group in the company. We want to know how you do it. And I told them, well, it's easy. I don't try. I need people to work. I mean, and I set a time to interview. a few months, and then I select the most qualified candidates. And those things like race or religion just are not part of the criteria that I use to hire. And I didn't realize just exactly what I had accomplished until later, when I started looking at some of the pictures of my group. And we used to go out every Halloween for Harley Day. Everybody would dress up in black Harley stuff, and we'd take a picture at a Mexican restaurant. And I started looking at the group, and I started seeing how diverse it actually was, because it never dawned on me that that's what was going on. So it's interesting that that I've always realized that everybody's different, and but that doesn't mean that we need to persecute anybody for anything other than being a bad person. I moved into an area here in North Oaks in 1965. I'm still here. The demographics of the area has changed dramatically since I've been here. When I moved in, it was a relatively new development, and it was predominantly Caucasian. Now it's predominantly Hispanic. But you know what? I love all my neighbors. They're all great. I mean, we all get along really well. There's no reason not to appreciate the good things that we have. So that's kind of what set me in the mindset that I'm in. I talk to Carole about this every now and then, in the fact that I just don't look at people that way. I know my wife worked at Kaiser Hospitals for 57 years. And early on in her career, she had a really good friend named Alice, and Alice and Jess became the godparents of my children. They happen to be Black, but that wasn't anything that we used as to make that decision. They were just good people. So that's kind of where I come from. And
your work in Santa Clarita has, yes, you've done a lot in Santa Clarita by being creator of and chair for multiple years of the Canyon Advisory Committee, and frequently testifying at city, frequently
at city council meetings. So if you really want to understand a little bit more of that, I wrote a great article this week. I
know, I liked it a lot. Have you read it? It's called
is institutional racism alive in Santa Clarita? And I list an example of when I applied for the Sulphur Springs School District and was turned down with a person telling me, well, you're probably the most qualified, but we want a Latino woman. And that's a definition of institutional racism. Making decisions based upon race and ethnicity is just not what we should be doing. Now, maybe that person is a great person, but at the same time, that's not. I couldn't believe that I was listening to somebody tell me that on a recorded line when we were doing things.
Let me stop, because are there people who have a different opinion about this? We're talking about affirmative action kinds of ideas. Is there anyone here that has a different perspective of that?
Well, I mean, of the way it was handled by the government.
Well, just the whole idea of we shouldn't consider a person's ethnicity or their background or.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I always tell the story about Carole. And in the middle of my career, I went back to college because the company changed some rules, and I went back with some employees. And then I ended up going back and getting a master's degree with my son. We both went to all the classes together, did all the stuff together. And we both graduated from our master's degree with distinction, meaning we had 4.0 grade point averages. And so they asked us to come back and teach classes. So there was a campus in Thousand Oaks, and we had classrooms next to each other. And one day he came to me and he said, I got a guy in my class who works at Lutness, and he'd really like to get an engineering job when he gets his degree. So would it be okay with you if we came and talked to you at dinner? because we used to go have dinner together because they were all evening class. So we did. Carl came and met with me, and I went through the little speech about how I really couldn't commit to a job or talk to him seriously about one until he applies for a posting, because that was a company policy. But since he comes highly recommended from somebody I think is really worthwhile to listen to, I'd apply if I was him. And he did, and I hired him. And he showed up the first day, and when he showed up the first day, gave me my first day speech about offices. Senior engineers, or rather engineers are in a one-person office, senior engineers, I'm sorry, engineers are in a three-person office, senior engineers are in a two-person office, engineering specialists are in their own office. He was a senior engineer. Here's where you sit. Here's your computer. I introduced him as group leader and said, we got about 2 weeks that we'll bring you up to speed, and then we'll assign a project to you. But if you have any problems, come see me. So I go into my office and I'm doing about 15 minutes later, Carl's at my door. And I said, Carl, what's up? And he said, do I read a desk and a computer of my own? I said, well, absolutely. Didn't I explain that to you? And I went through this thing again. So I thought about it a little bit, and I knew where he worked. So the next day I went over to the area that he was working. I knew most of the people there. I'd been at the company for a long time. And I went up to one of my buddies and I said, hey, I hired Carl. And a big smile comes over his face. He says, yeah, we know. And I said, is it really true that Carl did not have a desk or his own workstation here? And the guy's facial expression totally changed. He looked at me and he said, the boss doesn't like blacks. So I think the affirmative action is helping minorities in particular gain the kind of knowledge and ability to compete in the world, and they will, because there's no shortage of brains.
But my perspective is that there are essentially two kinds of white people. No, two kinds of people, but there are people like you, and I think everyone here on this panel, who don't see color in that kind of way. But there are other people. I loaned you that book called
I've read through sections of it. Yes. White Trash.
There are people who are extremely biased against the other, depending on what the other is. And those folks will do things in order to make sure that they're on top.
Well,
they see life as a contest.
I don't view it as
winners and losers. Let me finish, and then I'll give it back to you.
Okay,
hold your thought. They see life as a contest, winners and losers, and I have to be a winner because I don't like the feeling I get when I feel like other people think of me as a loser. Therefore, it's a zero-sum contest continually. Now, my framework with this is Trump. The thing that he said to his crowds all the time was, she's a loser, or he's a something, name calling and putting people down, because to a certain group of people, they like to feel that they're on top because of that whole feeling of trying to guard against shame. I'd love to open that up to folks. Does anyone else have other perspectives about this?
Well, let me just hit one little bit, and then
okay.
I look at it. You're right. I look at it differently.
You do.
I look at the fact that I can only do what I can do, and right. and from the standpoint of someone that is highly prejudiced, well, I can try to take care of that. But in the real thing that I can do is I can help people up.
Yes,
so,
and you have. I think you demonstrated
up.
that time and again. Val, would you like to kind of chime in on this?
Okay, so I agree with Alan and the majority of what he's saying. My background was 24 years in human resources. And you look at a position at a job spec, you determine what the requirements are for the job, you recruit for that job, and then you hire the best person for that job. And so that's what I did. I think where the sticky part comes in for me is that we are creatures of habit. And what I found in the workforce is that everyone, white, Black, Hispanic, whoever, are creatures of habit. And we enjoy having people around us that look and are like us. And so what I would find is that managers would want to hire that same way. And so I look at, when I think about whether or not Santa Clarita, or whether our business, our civic offices or whatever are systemically racist or not, I look at it like this. I believe that in many cases, I would never have said I need to hire a Hispanic for this position, because you just don't say that. But I think that oftentimes the playing field needs to be level, because we were not in the game at the same time as other races may have been, as the Caucasian race may have been. So sometimes you have to, that's what affirmative action is all about. It's about leveling the playing field and allowing, and it's not about teaching us or educating us, because we are already educated in a lot of these fields. It is just giving us the opportunity to compete in these fields. And so that, to me, that is what affirmative action is all about. Just give me the opportunity. I don't need an advantage. I just need to be able to sit at the table. But for decades, we weren't allowed to sit at the table. So
That's right. Yes.
So now it's just, I don't believe that everybody is, doesn't want people to get ahead of them or anything like that. I believe it's just that it's our nature to just want to be around and to hire. Our managers just wanted to hire people that look like them. But you have to show them that there are other people out there that are just as educated, just as trained, just as knowledgeable and professional as this other person that you think might be better qualified, if you allow them to come to the table.
Well, the thing that I found really was, and especially when I left and went from Lytton to JPL, I went into one department and I looked around the department, and the whole department was filled full of Asian women. And I talked to one of the guys. I said, "Well, how did that happen?" And they said, "Well, the boss liked Asian women, but he didn't hire the most qualified. He just hired Asian women." So if you are a person that goes out and just tries to hire a particular race of individuals, you won't get the highest qualified individuals to go get your job done. So that's why I like to use the approach of, I want to hire out of the time frame that I'm interviewing, because I need people. I would hire who I felt was the most qualified, and then your group tends to look a little different.
Duncan, you had go ahead.
I was just going to say, and sometimes you just have to, as the hiring either company or manager, sometimes you have to just widen your pool. So, and that's what we tried to get, that's what we did, because we would go out and have job fairs in Hispanic, colleges or groups or organizations. So you have to widen your pool sometimes. And then, otherwise, if you just advertise the position, you're going to get the same pool. So we have to be aggressive. We have to take that step to widen the pool sometime, and then hire the best qualified person for the position.
Excuse me, Duncan. Let me hit one more, and then I'll give it.
Duncan wants.
You know what? That's absolutely.
Duncan wants to come in on this too.
Right. That's absolutely true, and that's one of the discussions that I had with my affirmative action person, was that go bring me more qualified people. And if you have, and I know that you're looking to go bring in more qualified minorities, then do it. I'll hire them if they can go get the job done. And that's really important. Has anybody here heard of Eagle Academy and Dr. Ogo?
No.
Well, she's formed a charter school that's actually going to be up in the Tony Alamos.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I worked with her for maybe 3 years, working with her, trying to get her school done. And she is from Africa, and she is Black, and she had 2 really great kids, And I remember being down in Norwalk talking to them, and they talked to me about the problems in getting employed. And I told what I did was I gave them the same little lecture I used to give my college students, the same when they'd say, well, this isn't the most prestigious college. Can I go get a job? And I would tell them, you go to a employee to sell yourself. If they don't want you, you'll be too tall, too short, too skinny, too fat. You'll have the wrong education, gone to the wrong schools. They'll find some reason to get rid of you. What you have to do is smile, go to the next person and try your best to sell yourself, and you will succeed.
Okay, Duncan, we have about 4 minutes left. Duncan, how about you chiming in on this, okay?
Thank you. Yeah, I agreed with a lot of what everybody said. I guess the one slight difference with something that Valerie was saying about how we like being around people who are like us. I would tweak that a little bit to say we're just used to whatever we're used to. We like whatever we're used to. So, for example, I don't know why I'm not, just a total bigot or racist. I mean, I think it has to do with how I was raised. I was raised, my earliest memories are of living in Pakistan, in East Pakistan, which eventually became Bangladesh. They had a war for independence. And so from my earliest memories are living, in an area where we had a lot of different cultures. And so then it never seemed strange to me coming back to the United States. Well, to be honest, what seemed strange to me was when we came back to the United States, and I was living in the United States for the first time when I was about 7 years old. So I was in elementary school, and we ended up moving outside of Washington, D.C. to a very white neighborhood. That seemed strange to me at that point. And so I've never been really comfortable in it. In fact, when we first talked about moving up to Santa Clarita in 2003, I kind of didn't want to move up here because I just thought it was very, very monocultural. It's very, very white, and there wasn't a lot of diversity, and that it wouldn't really be a place that I'm used to being in and I'm not comfortable with. So I think that goes for a lot of things. I think our psychological biases are just so powerful. So, for example, I remember years ago learning of something that fascinated me, which was wherever you're sort of comfortable is where you'll pull back to. So, for example, when I was throughout my whole school years, I always saw myself as a B student. And I knew I could be an A student. I knew I could be a C student, but I was most comfortable with myself as a B student. And so no matter what you do, if I start doing too well in school or too poorly in school, then I don't even realize I'm making an adjustment to get back to my comfort level. The same goes for, I believe, income status. Like I come from a solid middle class, possibly upper middle class family. And so I'm much more comfortable. And I don't think it's any surprise that that's pretty much how I turned out. I think it would be very strange for me to have been really wealthy or really poor. So I think we make these adjustments without even knowing it. And perhaps affirmative action is just a tool we use to sort of correct for our own personal biases.
Okay, I've enjoyed this discussion, and Al, I want you to remember where you are, because we're certainly going to come back to you taking the lead, because you've made such an impact in this community over the years. Peg, did you want to say something?
I did. Just one quick comment. Can you hear me okay?
Sure, yeah.
We were talking about employment and seeking jobs, and Al, you were talking about interviewing people. One of the biggest problems I think that is a threat to minorities, not a threat personally, but that hampers minorities sometimes, is the written application process. Many of us know how to game the system when we're writing up an application, and not everybody does. And what I have found out in doing interviews is that we first get a stack of 80 applications. We have to read through those 80 applications, and we have to knock out 60 of them based strictly on how they present themselves written in a written format. And by doing this, we are oftentimes knocking out a lot of very qualified people who.
I am very sorry that we have to cut this section off. We've spent about 30 minutes, and I think it's been a very fruitful discussion. And I want to thank all of you for this. We're going to take a little break and then come back for the, there it is, 30 minutes, okay. And I'm going to start this again. All right, I hear you, okay.
Peggy, we should continue that conversation between us. I think that's a good. I just want you guys to know that when you come back to what you're comfortable with, I'm comfortable with all of you.
What's that? Say that again. I didn't hear you.
When you go back to where you're comfortable, I'm comfortable with all of you.
Great.
Yeah, well, that's what makes you, even we don't always see eye to eye on opinions. You're a very decent, honorable man, Al, and you do treat people fairly, and you try to listen to others' perspectives. But you're not, you are not the whole white bread
Sure.
community. Believe me. All right, so let's come back now to the second section of today's Bridging the Gap, Volume 3. And we're going to talk now with folks about Santa Clarita environmental issues. This has been a huge issue for years and years and years. And I'd love for Lynn to lead. Would you, Lynn?
Oh, sure. So, this valley has really seen major substantial change and development over the last 20 years, and it really hasn't been all for the good. We had such an opportunity to do so many things different. And when we became a city in 1987, there were great plans to protect oak trees and have like green belts along the river to protect the floodplain. And then we had the pressure from the development community. But we have this opportunity because we have a river running right through our valley. And Al has sometimes said it's not really a river because you can't put a boat on it. But when it floods, you put a boat on it. So, and there's a lot.
Put a submarine on it, right?
That's right.
And
That's right.
it's a, when we did river tours, we tried to impress on people that this is how Western rivers are. A lot of them are dry, and they have their own beauty. It's like, you have to understand desert beauty versus chaparral beauty versus Yosemite beauty. But anyway, so we have the river, and we have an oak resource that was quite fantastic, although over the last 2 decades, we've cut, probably 4,000 or 5,000 oak trees down for development. And they say they're supposed to be replanted 2 to 1, but that probably hasn't always happened, particularly not in this Gates King industrial project that they call Needham Ranch, or an industrial park. It's a park. When you put in Amazon, you have a park. So anyway, we have a endangered species hotspot. We have a number of endangered species on the Santa Clara River, and they are fast disappearing due to development. And we have serious air pollution problems. We have a landfill that's a regional landfill taking trash from as far away as Southern California, as Orange County and Riverside. That is such a big corporation that the county couldn't even get them under control. It's producing massive amounts of methane. They have not put in the air monitoring for the local community yet. We have some really huge environmental issues, and we have Newhall Ranch. And Newhall Ranch has claimed for many years, and the water agency claimed for many years, that there is plenty of water. Well, it's pretty interesting when you look at what happened in the last drought, and as we head into another drought, I think that's an important thing to think about. Is the water levels dropped so much that many of the wells stopped pumping. Trees died all over the valley because they tried to pump the wells so hard. Now, as climate change proceeds throughout California, we will have less snowpack in the Sierras. And that may sound like, well, why do we care? Because the snowpack in the Sierras is the largest dam that we have in California. It stores a huge amount of water. And it melts slowly. Over the last 70 years, it's melted slowly and produced a spring runoff that has then supplied cities throughout California farms with water through the summer. And that cycle is changing due to climate change. We had very little snow. The snow has less water content in it. And so this valley has developed on 50% of state water that and relied on its wells, and both of those sources are disappearing. But the water agency pretty much is controlled by developers and conservative corporate interests, and they don't want to admit that because that might slow down growth in the valley. And I would, Valerie Bradford ran for the water agency last year, and she did such a wonderful job doing it. If you want to jump in here and say anything about water supply.
It was interesting to me. My first experience with conserving and thinking about our water was during the last drought that we had. And I recall that it just really had a huge impact on my husband and I. So I recall that I started bringing buckets into the house, and I'd put a bucket in the shower and let the cold water run into the bucket when I, before the hot water came out, so I could take a shower. And then I take that water and use it to water my plants and things like that. This was long before I thought I would even run for a position on the water board. And I learned about how much water we waste just in brushing our teeth, just letting the water run while we brush, that type of thing. Those are things that kind of stuck with me. And so when the opportunity came up to run for a position on the water board, which was totally new to me, I did jump at the chance to do that. And it was such an educational experience. I didn't garner enough votes to win my seat, but I did garner over 13,000 votes and raised raised thousands and thousands of dollars. And so it was an amazing experience. I got to learn from Lynn Plambeck. I learned about our water coming from the Sierra Nevada mountains down through the San Joaquin and finally down to us. And I learned about our wells and how our water is affected by those and how they're contaminated. A good number of the wells that we have here in the Santa Clarita Valley. So it was an amazing experience and an extremely educational experience that I think everybody needs. I think we need to have classes to just educate everybody. I think that if people knew how costly it was for us to get that water from Northern California, that they might think twice about how we use it. So
I hope you'll run again.
Yeah. Now she wants to do, we told her right away she should run again.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it takes
because
more
it's
than
name
one time.
recognition. Val, it's name recognition,
Yeah,
I
she
agree.
should
I
do
agree.
it.
And
I wish
have
she would
several
do it
people say
again.
that.
Yeah, I ran twice. Dave ran twice. I ran for state assembly. That's
She
important.
almost won.
Yeah, I did well. I
Yeah,
scared
you
them.
did well.
They had to send out a lot of hit mailers to get me. I loved it. I loved it.
I saw today a thing online that was talking about a lawsuit that's going up to the, I imagine it's the California Supreme Court to declare the Delta smelt extinct.
Mm.
And if they do that, what do you think the possibility of them turning the pumps back on?
Well, I think it's actually too bad. People like to try to blame a lot of things on the Delta smelt. I mean, it's not just the smelt, the water's so hot this summer because of the drought and because of the low levels that we may lose a lot of salmon runs as well. And one of the things I like to try to get across to people is if you save the fish, if you make room for nature, you will save the humans as well. So we can say, oh, the spotted owls keeping us from having timber. But if you cut every tree down, you don't have a forest anymore, and you don't have a sustainable source of wood. And it's sort of the same thing with the river. If you have polluted the Sacramento, I mean, there's a big argument over, it's not just, the bass, it's like a multitude of things. They've got the sports fishers want the bass in there, and then the sanitation plant is putting too much ammonia in, and then the pumps are drawing them in. The pumps don't just draw in Delta smelt, they draw in the salmon runs as well. And the thing is that if we took better care of the river, if we took better care of the deltas, that we would have enough water for ourselves as well. But it's a matter of not wasting water. I mean, we have these, they planted all these almond trees on the west side of the San Joaquin Valley that take an enormous amount of state water. It's a big, huge corporate interest, the Resnicks. So you have that big corporate interest saying, we don't need smelt anymore. And the end result is they plant almonds and make a lot of money. And then there's not enough water even coming down south, because it's not really so much, the urban areas, it's wasting water in the San Joaquin Valley.
Right.
And the State Water Project was built for a backup for the farmers. They were supposed to reduce pumping, and then because they were using state water. And then what did they do? They pumped and they sold it. And it was all this big Monterey agreement and it was all corporate interests. It's Southern California developers wanting to build beyond the capacity of their regional area. It's farmers growing crops that they have no business growing, like almond trees. Before, in the Central Valley, they had row crops. And then if you had a bad water year, then you didn't plant. That now, if you have a bad water year, you try to get a deeper well and pump the heck out of it. And what's the result of that? You're having subsidence, you're having horrible salt problems, you're having all sorts of, pollution problems that you wouldn't have had if you didn't use the water so poorly. But I mean, it's like we have a fight with our own sanitation plant about making sure they reach the total maximum daily loads, so they don't exceed them for contaminants. It's the same thing in Sacramento River. But I imagine that the people behind trying to declare the salmon extinct are the farmers, and it's not regular farmers, it's big corporate farmers.
No, it's my understanding that the majority of the smelt population exists in fisheries, not in the Delta. So that's what they're claiming, and they're claiming the number of smelt are way down inside the Delta itself. Now, if in fact it's true, and remember that part of the salmon problem is the fact they're not pumping water, so they're getting seawater intrusion.
I don't know where you got that, Al.
They have seawater intrusion.
About?
They have seawater intrusion into the Delta.
But that's from overpumping. You get intrusion from overpumping, not from not pumping. You need to not pump so much so that you push the salt out.
Well, we're talking about pumping through the Delta, not pumping from underground.
No, they're not letting the flows go into the Delta. That's the problem. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe you're talking about different areas, but that's another issue. And that's one of the things I say about if we save the fish, we'll save the people, because when they overpump the Delta, they do have saltwater intrusion. That's why our water got so salty down here. It was the imports. It wasn't the wells.
I'm sure there was a time, I mean, I'm not an expert, but I'm just assuming that there was a time when the smelt and the salmon were both running okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's before they
So
started doing.
it's not an either or.
No, you would have both.
Well, in this case, it might have been, because when they stopped pumping fresh water through the Delta, they had water intrusion into the Delta, and then they started having to truck salmon upstream because they couldn't find the fresh water.
I'm sure you have that wrong. I can send you the information about pumping from the Delta, that they had intrusion because they were pumping too much. As a matter of fact, they had a whole regulation called 1645 to try to make them stop pumping so much when the salt got to a certain level, because what they were doing is taking so much you have to have the freshwater flows into the ocean to keep the salt water out. And they were reducing the flows with those massive pumps, and the end result
You
was.
and I are
So
saying the
what
same thing. You're saying the same thing
I don't think,
because I'm talking about pumping through the delta, not pumping from the delta. But we can talk about it. I think it's a good subject. It's something that we should both
Well,
understand.
my perspective, it's important for us to find understanding about what these water issues and air quality issues and environmental issues are. But we really have to face the fact that if we continue the way we are, Southern California is going to be an uninhabitable desert within 40, 50 years. We are in trouble environmentally. And I don't think that, and it's important that we take these current issues, but we have to see we have to find common ground, I think, about realizing how serious our environmental threat is right now, and go from that in trying to accommodate, find the needs, the various needs, the corporate farmers and developers, and we the people, and the environment, and the smelt and all of that. It comes back to money and politics. It comes back to the whole issue being that big money pretty well controls every layer of government. Dave?
Monocultures are capitally, they are capitally very friendly. Monocultures are a cash cow. Monocultures are inherently unstable.
Go ahead.
This is why the Dust Bowl was a problem.
Well,
in the
that's true.
20s.
That's that. Yeah.
Yeah,
that
they
was-
This is
Sweet.
why jackrabbits devastated Australia, because there was no competition and they became a monoculture. And when you have a monoculture, you have a susceptibility to population crashes. And the reason you have susceptibility to population crashes is that there's one choke point or a couple of choke points that get hit, and that messes up the whole ecosystem.
Can I ask you a question?
Monocultures make money. And
Well,
the most serious monoculture that we are facing today is
us.
Population.
So here's my cat, Susie. She's
Oh.
coming to say
Yeah,
hello.
I like that cat. That's a cool cat. you know?
Anytime I get
can I
on the
ask-
computer, she wants to be in it.
Well, Nellie is right here. She's not climbing on me right now, but that's what were you going to say, Duncan?
I was wondering, I was going to ask Lynn about, another concern I have. The horror story that I see happening in the future is water privatization. And I was wondering, I've heard this horror stories from other countries, but do we have concerns about that here too?
Absolutely. I've worked on water privatization for a long time. I mean, in our own community, we had Valencia Water Company, who was owned by the major developer New Holland and Farming, that is now 5 Points Lennar. And, they had no reason to report water supply correctly. They were, their parent company, of course, was never going to have if you own the water company, you can always say you have enough water. So, and if you have privatization, you have less control to make sure the water is healthy. But, just recently they've started trading water. One of the scary things that is a water privatization issue that's been going on for a long time, sort of behind the scenes, is these private companies have these large storage areas in the Central Valley, and they're corporations. They're
Nestle's.
Yeah, well, it's not so much Nestle's, I don't think, that owns these water storage areas. It was the French one.
Benchell?
No, Bechtel, you're thinking. Bechtel was down in South America. Oh, I'll
Nestle
think
is a
about it.
huge problem internationally.
Oh, right,
Oh,
they
yeah.
are, sure. Because, right, well, they're a problem here because they were supposed to have some laws over getting water rights to pump. But everybody, they'll just pump the stream dry. And if you're out in a rural area like Mount Shasta, they tried to do it in Gorman. Riverside has had terrible problems because they'll just pump everything dry to bottle it and send it away. And that's one form. But then there's these other, I can't remember if it's Soyuz or something. Anyway, they buy these storage areas and then a private developer or a private farmer can put the water in the storage area and then sell it around to people if that's, if you have a water market. So what you have, somebody like Newhall Ranch has stored water in bought capacity and bought water from a private person, and now they want the water to deliver this water directly to them through their pipes, through public process. So if you have a large developer owning all the water, he can say, well, it's going to go to my project, and you don't have anything to say about, maybe you won't have anything to say about how I build my project because I'm the only one that has water. So I'm going to have to be the one that builds the projects. So little guys that can't do things like that might do a really good job of planning, can't get the water because it's all been commandeered by one large company. And
But ultimately, isn't there always government gatekeepers that are allowing this to happen? At least in the United States.
Oh, sure. I mean, you look at our water board. I mean, we have a water board. I have been saying probably for the last 6 years or 8 years on the water board to the Castaic Lake Water Agency. Now I'm sitting on that board because they merged everything, which I was strongly opposed to because that created a huge monopoly. But they subsidize everything for Newhall. They're putting in all their pipes. And then we are paying through our tax money to help build Newhall's pipes. And Newhall, I shouldn't say Newhall now because it's 5 Point. They have plenty of money. Congressman Garcia voted no on all the aid to help people that were having trouble with the COVID. But he just got a earmark for 5 Point to put in $3 million towards their Commerce Center Bridge. So he doesn't want to.
And
what
what are their contributions to his campaign?
Oh, probably.
To him politically.
Well, this is what you do. It's like you rub my back and I'll rub yours, right?
Well,
Yeah, absolutely.
He gets $3 million for their bridge for them.
You look on the social justice websites that track that. You look on Project Vote Smart, you look on Open Secrets, you look on Snopes. These are reputable and accurate. Media Matters, the Pinocchio.
Well, you can go right on Garcia's website and
you can find out where they're getting their money, and then you see how they vote.
Okay. But I'd really like to hear more about how we can individually help with this problem. I mean, I heard Valerie talk about saving the cold water that was coming out of her pipe and watering her plants. I did it a little differently, Valerie. I installed a recirculating pump, so there is no cold water coming out of my and I heard just recently that the city is now allowing people to install systems to trap rainwater, which was illegal very shortly ago.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So are there more
Ridiculous.
things are there more areas?
Well, yeah, I've had a
individuals can do?
I've had a rain barrel for a long time. Unfortunately, it doesn't trap very much. So I have a system where I ran the rain barrel. I ran all the water off my roof into my spa. And then, of course, it's too dirty. You can't drink that stuff. So you put it in your garden. But then I have to have a pump to get it out of the spa. But that's what I do all winter.
Peg, were you? I thought I saw your hand up. Did you have anything to add?
Mute.
Not too much, except that when I said before I wasn't an activist, I'm not an activist, but I do observe various things within my own personal life to be conserving water.
Yeah, see, that's what I knew, that you were an environmentalist at heart.
What do you think?
But what's frustrating,
Are we gonna get to a point pretty soon where we can use gray water?
Well, I
Sure.
hope so. You know, I mean, they've started trying to allow people to just put off your kitchen sink, go out to your garden. And for instance, the way the Lutness's house is set up is perfect for that, because their kitchen sink sort of runs right out on their patio. And so if they put the drain out to the, but there's pretty big issues with that. So you have to be, I mean, you have to, it would be nice if we thought about everybody could run the shower into their backyards, but people pee in the shower. So,
Well, yeah, but
I
things
mean,
like,
let's be real, they do that. So,
but washing machines
well,
at my
washing
house,
machines. So then you get into the problem of what are you using for soap?
Yeah.
right, you have to use the right
And-
detergents.
Yeah,
Right.
you have to use the right detergent. And one thing about, I mean, it's really expensive to congregate everything and put it into a sewer system. But then when they do that, they do test and make sure that the chemistry is clean enough to put it back in the river or put it back into recycled water system. But
Well,
And
Down-
changing the
down-
public, educating the public and changing their mindset about using gray water is going to be expensive as well.
mhm,
So,
right,
And also about buying bottled water,
yeah, that's,
Oof.
and that aids
making the rich
privatization.
man richer by
Yeah.
you paying 100, 200% more than getting the same high quality water. Actually, the water that is coming out of the spigot is tested all the time,
Mhm.
whereas a lot of the bottled water is never tested. So, and then these
Right.
people who go to the store and they have these big water places where they take their jugs and fill their jugs up. That stuff, I don't know if they're doing it now, but they were not cleaning
No.
those.
there's a public confidence issue, because I've talked to so many people who feel
Mhm.
like, you know, they don't trust the water coming from the tap, and maybe they don't buy bottled water, but they want to filter it. I mean,
Yeah.
my own family, my wife, she wants to, you know, we're totally against bottled water, but she still wants to filter water. And then she catches me filling up when we put water bottles in the fridge to, you know, keep them cold. And then she'll catch me just filling it up from the tap, because I don't care. I trust it.
I
Mhm.
guarantee
Well,
you,
I
The
mean,
issue
for
is we have
instance, I'm at the end of a line and they chlorinate to make sure that it's, you know, we don't have any coliform in the water or something. And I get pretty chlorinated water sometimes where they put it in. They have to make sure that it's at a certain level and it may not be equally distributed. So I'll get a good blast of chlorinated water once in a while. I always filter my water because I don't want to have that chlorinated water. But, you know, Duncan, they
Okay.
actually, people in this valley that have been here for a long time, they actually have some reason to be distrustful. And it's not necessarily the water agency's fault, but we have had a lot of industry in this valley. We had Whitaker Burmite, and you know, they were a very old company. They were here in 1940s before the EPA was established. And what they used to do is take any chemistry that they didn't want to use, and they were making rockets and bombs and hardened
Mhm.
uranium warheads and all kinds of crap.
And firecrackers.
Yeah, and they would just take the drums when they didn't need them anymore and dump them out in the back 40 and bury them. And of course, the drums deteriorated and it got into the water supply. And then they were doing rocket stuff, so
Chloride.
so we had really bad perchlorate pollution.
And they
And-
got a pass because it's all military. It's all part of our
Well, they got
nation's
a
They
defense,
pass.
got a
right?
pass because it was the accepted practice at the time.
That's right.
JPL up there in the
Yep.
Arroyo Grande have exactly the same problem.
Mhm. And frankly, I can't understand how engineers would have thought. I know I've heard Lockheed engineers tell me, well, we never knew that trichloroethylene was going to go through that big tank and get into the ground. And I'm going, well, how could you not? You know? And then other people told me, well, we told them, but they wouldn't listen. So I don't know who to believe about that. But one of the problems was that EPA didn't start testing for perchlorate until 1997. And the reason they didn't was they didn't have a test that was sensitive enough to find it. And so in 1997, they went around they did a survey of industries that might have produced ammonium perchlorate that would get into the water system. And they identified Whitaker Burmite as one of those industries. And sure enough, when they tested, we had very high levels of ammonium perchlorate. We also had TCE and PCE, which are volatile organic compounds, which are carcinogens. Perchlorate is not a carcinogen. It just causes, it affects the thyroid gland, and it's very, it can cause retardation in fetuses and small children, because of course the little guys are the ones that it always hurts the most. So, I just want to finish this, that they
Dave
didn't
wants to talk.
Okay, but I
We're
want to
almost
just
out of
say,
time,
let me
guys.
just get to the end of my thought here, is
Okay.
that the reason people don't trust it is because then they were all drinking this stuff. I have thyroid problems, probably because I was served it. Now we have PFAS in the water. You know, and it wasn't the water company's fault, but we didn't look for PFAS, and now people were drinking PFAS for years. So in one way, I think it's safe that you're not getting coliform, but another way, I understand why people are skeptical.
Dave, real quickly, hon, we've got to wrap up now.
You are absolutely incorrect when you talk about individual behavior solving global problems.
No, they solve parts of the problem.
No, they cover up the problem. Recycling bottles does not do anything to solve the problem that we make too much plastic and release it into the environment.
I agree with that.
Recycling, filtering water does not do anything to solve the problem of having a sustainable source of water.
Well, this is right on track, Dave, because we treat symptoms.
You need
actually
to have society behave in a responsible manner. Now,
From the
my
start.
solution to the problem in a democracy is a 50% tax on all political contributions.
Okay.
Okay,
It's fine with
all in
me.
favor? All right, well, we have to wrap up, guys. And I have really, really loved this evening. I don't know about you all. Al, thank you so much for all the insight that you provided.
And I still feel comfortable with all of you.